Yo, what's up, everyone? I decided to do this via a video post instead of doing it via a just generally written newsletter, mainly because context matters, tone of voice in this instance is going to be important, and just nuance as well. I think that sometimes when you write things, it's hard to construe tone, construe opinion, unless I'm like, in my opinion, but I don't want to write that 50 times. And the reason I've chose to do it like this is because I'm replying to Chris's message on, if you go over to Substack, go into the chat, there's a mailbag thread there. And Chris asked a question yesterday saying, Adam, if you were Brad, but had to go under the second apron, but would have all the freedom to decide on or renegotiate contracts, what would you do? So this is basically a fantasy GM question. And the reason I'm joined by my boy Billy, who some of you may know through the podcast, is because Billy is way more clued up on the cap than I am. So we were kind of going to discuss, I'd give my opinion, Billy would give his opinion, would I kind of ideate what we would do if we were the GM for a week or a day or whatever you want. And then the part two of the question would be, do you think the Celtics should still pursue playoffs in the 2025 season to try and be a top five-ish team, or just go for a full gap year tank and then bet on bouncing back the year after? So I think that we'll discuss that first because that's then going to control the decisions Billy and I make as co-GMs for the moves that we're going to make. So I just thought this would be really fun to do as a video post. Like, it doesn't happen often where I post these instead of writing, but sometimes they work really well. So Billy, man, thanks for hopping on to this with me, bud.
Oh, this is gonna be
So
fun.
let's start with this. Do we think the Celtics should still pursue a top five place? And I'm assuming that's in the East, not in the league, because without Jason Tatum being a top five team in the league, it's really difficult, if not impossible, just because of how deep the West is. Or do they just go for a full gap year and basically full on tank? Now, ideally, that would have been this year. If you were going to tank ever, you were going to tank for Cooper Flag. I don't think the 2026 draft is going to be as top heavy. Maybe I'm not, I haven't really looked at who the prospects are next year,
Oh,
but
it's a good draft though.
is it a good draft?
Yeah, where it's like not like just one guy, but like 2 through 13, you could get a player that's pretty good. Like it's a
It
deeper
worth
draft.
See, so my stance on this since Tatum went down has always been I would much rather build through acquiring young guys in need of a new home, like young guys with proven upside, but they just haven't really figured it out where they're at. I'd much rather chase those guys and then be a competitive team that way than I would go on a full rebuild. Just because even if you do move on from Jrue or you move on from Kristaps, there's still a lot of veteran NBA champion talent in that roster that would not be pleased with just being told to basically, we're shooting for the draft lottery. So I've been like a competitive retooling is the way I've kind of worded it to myself. Do you kind of sit the same way?
Yeah, so when I say I want draft picks or I want like in my ideal scenario, we could have a gap year and be in the lottery. The realistic part of that is it's just not possible. The East is too bad. You're not going to be bad enough to be in the lottery. But the reason why I want those picks is because I want to go big fish hunting next summer. So I want to kind of stockpile and add up assets, and we don't even know who will be available next summer. Every year, it's a surprise. Be like, can you believe this person wants out or that person wants out? And you can go through all kinds of dream scenarios like, oh wow, Evan Mobley wants out. I never thought he would be available or whatever, just throwing names to throw names. But I do want the picks, not for us to make the picks, but to have in our arsenal to make trades.
Okay, so we kind of differ there. Whereas I'd prefer proven talent, you'd prefer draft picks, and which is fine because then you're flipping for a bigger guy. So like guys like for me, guys like Keegan Murray, Cam Whitmore, Jonathan Kuminga isn't a good example, but not somebody I would expect the Celtics to actually try and pursue. Just because it's a sign and trade, you get hard capped. It's almost impossible for Boston to do a deal like that right now. But it's a really good example of like a guy that's a genuine high potential guy that just needs a new situation where he's going to get minutes and an opportunity to be in a system that could bring the best out of him. I think there's a few guys around the league like that for Boston. But I think we both agree that this is going to be a competitive team next year. I'm not saying they're going to be top five in the East, but I'm not saying, but given how weak the East is, especially if the Sixers shit the bed another year, it's definitely quite viable for them to do that.
And it's going to be like, I think a lot of people, I mean, we know this league is like monkey see, monkey do. They copy what other teams do that work. And I think everybody's going to be looking for like what Indiana did, where it wasn't a huge move, but it was a move enough to get them into the place where they can make multiple Eastern Conference finals. And now it looks like probably a final. So who is the next Siakam? The guy that's always considered good, but never was like the number one guy that can get you there. But if he's your number two or three, you got something. And there is somebody I'm looking at. He's in Utah, and I think could be that for a team. I don't know if he'll be for us, but I would definitely take a look at Laurie Markkinen.
But yeah, I like Larry Markkinen. I like Larry Markkinen. So this is where we move on, right? This if we had to get under the second apron, but had all the freedom to decide or renegotiate, what would we do? And this is where we can start talking prospects, trade ideas. I know I sent you one earlier that you were just like, absolutely not. And again, this is kind of why I wanted to do this on audio, so there's more nuance to our voices, more a lot easier to kind of conceptualize where we're coming from. So I think the way we're going to start this is we've got to get under the second apron. So, Billy, if you want to explain where the second apron sits, what you need to be at cap wise to be under it, and how much the Celtics need to drop to do that, I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, so it's basically about 207 million payroll will be the second apron. We're at like 220 something. Once you factor in all the rookies, if we re-sign Al, fill out the roster, you're probably looking at closer to 230 million. Everybody likes to say renegotiate contracts. I don't know where this idea came from. I guess people watch too much NFL. There is no renegotiating contracts. There was no like, oh, I'm going to take less now and we're going to cut this contract you already have in half or do anything like that. The only thing you can do is when somebody's up for an extension, they can extend for more years, less money. Guess what? None of our guys are in that situation. Jalen Brown, Tatum, White, all those guys, all the money's guaranteed. So there's none of that going to happen. What you can do though is once you get under the second apron, that's when you could start doing like two for ones. That's when you can aggregate salary. That's when you can do all the bigger moves. So like our move before the move will just be to get under that apron. And there's a few really easy ways to do it, especially with how popular Drew Holiday is around the league right now. There's three teams that are bidding for him, and any of those three teams, if he
Reportedly.
reportedly, and I trust the reporting. Mark Stein is the goat, and Fish and the other guys are pretty good too. I would say that it'd be pretty easy with just a Drew Holiday trade to get under the apron, but there's other ways you can do it. You do like a Hauser and somebody else, and there's a lot of different ways to get under that apron.
Okay, so if we operate under the idea that and we're overshooting here because we're factoring in rookies and we're factoring in veteran minimums and potentially a slight increase for Luke. If we say the Celtics need to shed 23 million in salary, I think that we're going to be comfortably falling underneath that second apron, right? And that's when you
Absolutely.
can start. That's when you can start doing all of the good stuff. That's when you can start doing your two for ones. It's when you can start sending one guy out and taking more money back if you need to, as long as you're trying not to get back in that second apron. So I want to start with this right now. I've been toying around with some trade ideas, as you saw, and one of them was a Drew Holiday trade. And again, I'm going to admit I am unnaturally high on Cam Whitmore and his potential fit for the Celtics as a guy that can just add some scoring off the bench and like diverse scoring, right? I think that you've got enough perimeter scoring in Sam and Payton. I'm just on about diverse. Maybe you get some rim pressure, some mid range. I think there's another. He hasn't had the best of opportunities in Houston. He did in his first season, but as Houston has become more competitive. So the trade is a free team deal because I feel like the Celtics are going to be at their best in trying to shed salary in a free team deal. And this trade would shave off around about 7.5 mil. So they'd be getting assets back. They save 7.5 mil, but then you can build on that with other trades. Now I know you've got an idea of one as well, so we'll throw both out. We'll talk and then we'll move on. So this deal is three teams. It's the Celtics acquire Cam Whitmore, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Chris Dunn. So you get back a defensive-minded guard. You get back Bogdan. Both of those guys will be on expiring deals. They're easy to flip later in the season. And you get back Cam Whitmore, who's, in my opinion, the prize in this specific trade, right? The Rockets get Derek Jones Jr., and then the Clippers, where Drew's going, get Drew Holiday and Jashawn Tate. And that kind of, to me, that kind of worked for everybody a little bit. But obviously, I kind of built this package around getting the player back that I would want in terms of building around a young guy that's proven in the NBA, but has a couple more levels that he can reach. Is that one where you're like, I'm not touching it? I want more back for Drew? Is it like, I don't want to send Drew to LA? I don't want to be in bed with the Rockets? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I like it without the Rockets because I'm big on Derek Jones and I'm big on Bogdanovic. So I'm like, keep both or maybe reroute one to save more money. But I'm cool with it even the way you kind of proposed it because I think that's about the value we're gonna get. Because like my counter would be like, okay, let's do what pretty much the only package Dallas can offer is Gafford and PJ Washington. And you can keep one of those two, you could keep both of them or reroute one and save more money. But that's pretty much seems to be where the value is kind of hitting for Drew Holiday. It's like those kind of players. You're going to get good rotation, arguably starters, quality players back, and you're going to get expiring and save money. So something like that. I'd rather keep Derrick Jones Jr. I'd rather keep Odonovich. But if we're just trying to get under the apron and to make a bigger move, you could reroute one of those guys so easily. I love it. And it's the same thing with Dallas and Gafford and PJ. Like, pick which one you want to keep, reroute the other, or keep both. They're both good players.
And this is where I was at when I was doing it. When I was building this trade, I was like, right, you're 7.6 million under with the way this trade is built right now. If you were going to absorb Derrick Jones Jr. yourself, then you would probably need to drop both Chris Dunn and Cam Whitmore and get Bogdan and Derrick Jones back. But then in my head, I'm like, well, you're getting two veterans, but you're not getting anyone that you like that has that upside. And the whole point of me doing the trade was for Cam. And then I was like, I like Chris Dunn because he can give you some defensive dog off the bench or whatever it needs to be that you're going to lose when you move on from Jrue. And again, it's easy to flip him at the trade deadline. It's easy to flip Bogdan at the trade deadline to try and get assets back or get a little bit younger. And then Cam Whitmore for me was kind of like, hey, if he doesn't hit, what have we really lost? But if he does hit, because we're going to have to trade Jrue anyway by the reporting that's out there. Whereas if he does hit, then this is another guy that can help us in 2 years when Tatum's back in the rotation properly. So this is the type of deal that I'd be expecting for Jrue, like you said, a couple of expiring, maybe a young guy that you can kind of pin your hopes on a little bit, potentially sending out a draft like in this trade as well. I forgot to mention I'd put like a 2025 first from LAC, and I'm against this, but I like Cam Whitmore enough to do it. A 2026 lottery protected first off Boston. You know, if something goes fucking awfully wrong, then you like if the Celtics end up in the lottery next year, it's still protected and it would just convey into a second year after or whatever. So that's a kind of trade that I've got for Jrue. That would put you 7.5 million, 7.6 to be precise, lower than what you are now, but you'd still need to shed probably around about another 16 million to get under that second apron, right? And this is the thing that I think everybody needs to kind of remember. And I'm sure most people do anyway, but I see a lot of the talk online. These trades are going to have things coming back to Boston. It's not going to be, hey, you're going to take a player and we're not going to take anything back. And that's where the trickiness gets there because now you're having to make multiple deals just to shed enough salary to get under to be in a place where you can make one bigger deal. So that puts you then to me, that turns my attention to Kristaps. I don't know about you, but I'm like, right, for me, Kristaps Porzingis should be the number one dude you're looking to drop anyway. Two kind of shitty off seasons, post seasons from him now. The first one, obviously, he got injured. He had that game one of the NBA finals. Second one, he's got this virus, but for some reason, like some way, somehow, he's not ready to go in the postseason. 2 years in a row, I'm okay. I don't really want to have to live through that for a third year. Have you got any Kristaps ideas where you'd send Kristaps? Is this where Utah comes into it for you, or do you think do you think Utah would do a Kristaps for Lowry? Because I think Lowry last year had a bunch of interest from, if I remember correctly, it was the Warriors for a while. There'd be interest in him again if he was made available, and I'm not sure how much the Celtics could really get in on that.
Yeah, Laurie seems a little high for me. I think we gotta aim a little lower. There's teams that are desperate for a big that have guys that just don't really fit what they're doing right now. So, I hate to say it, I'm looking at the Lakers. I'm looking at somebody like Rui Hachimura. I think that's like a more realistic guy you could get back
Yeah.
for Kristaps, and then you probably have to reroute some salary to a third team, which is always easier said than done. But with Utah, they do have like some, there's like the Colin Sextons. They have some contracts that you could probably get back for Kristaps, and that might be easier to move two guys in different deals than just have one guy expiring, and it might make us more flexible. So I would definitely pick up the phone for Utah. I just don't know what the ceiling is of like what we could get back. Like I'm not really interested in Collins. I'm not really interested in Sexton, but they do have guys that they want to move. But at the point where it's Kristaps and it's an expiring, you probably can get something better out there. Like Rui Hachimura is a solid player.
Yeah, I like Rui. I think the Warriors are another option there. They've been needing size for a while, and Mike Dunleavy Jr. has been very vocal about it needing to be size with skill. Now, there's two bigs coming into this summer that could fit that. One of them is Porzingis, the other one is Vucevic from Chicago. Both of them guys will be on expiring deals, be easy to pick them up, easy to run with them for a year, and then could just discard them if they don't really do what you need them to do. The Warriors don't really have a ton of tradable assets in terms of what could help Boston. They also would need to match salaries quite closely because they've got their own cap issues. You've got Steph, Draymond, and Jimmy all under contract. In any deal there, I'd want Brandon Podziemski or I'd want Moses Moody, one of the two, right? And I feel like you're more likely to get Moses than you are Brandon, but I think Brandon's more a Joe Mazzulla player where he's a Swiss Army knife, can do a little bit of everything, defends well. I'm just not sure how easy it'd be to pry him away when sending back an injury prone dude. Like, I'm just not sure where it would go. I actually think finding a taker for KP is going to be harder than what people think, just because whoever's picking him up is going to be picking him up to fill a need. And there's big concerns about whether or not he can stay healthy. It's the same concern Celtics fans had when Boston traded for him 2 years ago. And now another team's going to have to make the decision of like, can we keep him healthy going into the postseason? And if their answer is we're not sure, you might see the Celtics have to kind of like eat crow for a little bit and maybe stand pat until closer to the trade deadline to move on from KP.
Yeah, I know everybody wants, like, the fireworks to happen immediately in, like, July and, 4th of July, and let's blow everything up. I do think that you move one of Jrue or KP in the summer and one probably at the deadline. I really don't think it's realistic to move both in the same summer. That's a lot of
And it
upheaval.
could happen, but it's not that straightforward, right? I mean, and I'm just sorry to cut you here. The only downside there is it makes it really hard for Brad to kind of retool this roster going into a season so they get a camp together. But again, this is always meant to be a last year.
Yeah, I don't think they care about that, like, I
Yeah,
mean, you can sleepwalk to a 5 or 6 seed in the East. The Miami Heat have been doing it for the last 5 years, so I'm not really too
that's fair.
worried about that, but I do think that, like, it's gonna look bad before it looks good. So, like, the first deal might come, and then we might go a couple months without another deal, and everybody's gonna panic, everybody's gonna be like, "Man, we're done, this is over." It's like, patience, guys. It's gonna take time.
And that leads us on to the more difficult one, right, is the Jalen Brown potentially trading Jalen Brown, and why that would make sense and why it wouldn't make sense. So I've got this down as it would make sense if you're trying to really maximize the assets that you get back, really maximize what you're trying to do in time for when Tatum returns. And what I mean here is you're stripping this team down and then rebuilding it where there's unquestionably Jason Tatum is your guy, and there's you don't really need Jalen Brown because you want to get younger, you want to get cheaper, and maybe there's some concerns about that knee. Those knee issues are more than just this last year. So the Celtics may be like, right, we want to move off of that deal. The reasons to keep Jalen Brown are he's what 28. He's literally in his prime. We've all waited for the Jays to hit their prime together. Now they're there. A lot of people are like, well, why would you trade a all-star or potential all-star forward in his prime? The outside of trying to just duck the luxury tax because if you make a Jalen Brown trade, you're almost guaranteed to drop enough money to drop out of that luxury tax. There isn't really much of a reason to do it, and because you're not going to try and get a Kevin Durant, you don't want someone older. You're not going to get some of these young dudes. It's not like Ant's going to become available in a JB for Ant trade. There's going to be no random Luka Doncic becoming available that will only get dealt to Boston. So it is very much a money move if you decide to move on from JB. Now, if you do, there are a few teams that make sense there, but there's also a few teams that don't really make sense in terms of trade partners, but like I'd expect Atlanta to be really close to the front of that line, but I don't expect them to have enough by the way of trade chips to make a deal viable, right? Do you know what I mean? So before we go any further, where are you? Are you want to trade JB, or you want to keep JB, or you want to kind of let's go fishing with JB and see what packages crop up?
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm kinda leaning, like, obviously, you have JB and Tatum together, you're guaranteed 50 plus wins, you're pretty much guaranteed a conference finals, maybe a semifinals if injury luck kinda bites you in the butt like it did this year, but it's just your ceiling is so high with just those 2. To trade him, it can't be for financial reasons, and I really believe that they wouldn't trade a player so beloved by the city, and he's, like, such a big active person in the city. Like it wouldn't be a Luca level where it's like people are gonna be crying in the streets, but people would be really hurt by trading Jalen Brown because he's so important to the community. Where it have to be a basketball trade. Now, what does a basketball trade look like? I'm looking at like what the Knicks gave up for Mikal Bridges. Like if I get 5 first round picks, a young guy, somebody like some useful stuff, and a lot of picks, I want a haul. I want it all. I don't want just one guy or two guys. I want like the world. Like if some team strikes out on Giannis, I want that Giannis package, but for Brown.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, to me, a lot depends on the young guy that's coming back, right? So if it's a young guy that Brad is incredibly high on, that he's like, it's a surefire, no brainer. You cannot miss by adding this guy. Like kind of like how the Pacers felt when they moved on from Demontis for Tyrese, right? And I know that Demontis isn't the same level of star as Brown, but just to give an example that's kind of recent enough where you're like, man, the Pacers fans love Demontis, but they got Tyrese and it was like a guaranteed we're not going to miss if we make this deal. Now, if you get in one of those guys, then the draft haul that you get back probably isn't going to be as high, and that's okay because you're getting a guy back that's going to be able to be complementary to Tatum for the next 5, 8 years or till Tatum's ready to retire, and then maybe you still get a few good years out of whoever you bring in. I'm very much on the train of you trade Brown if you need to trade Brown. Now, what I mean by this is, and this would be like a later in the year, or if you get to the trade deadline and you haven't moved on from anyone, and now you're looking at like the luxury tax because your tax bill doesn't come due until the end of the season, if I remember correctly. So if you're like in February, you haven't really found anyone or a package that makes sense for Jrue. You haven't found a package that makes sense for Kristaps. Ownership is breathing down your neck because you're a fifth seed and you're looking at a $500 million fucking luxury bill. Then maybe you consider trading Jalen Brown because it's like, well, ownership have told us we need to get cheaper. This is a really big luxury tax bill, and there's 8 packages we can choose from for Jalen, but there's really bad options for Jrue, and no one wants KP. Maybe then you do that, but I do think that Kristaps' expiring contract is going to be valuable around the league. I think we're already seeing Jrue's value around the league, so I think that, as you said, a basketball trade for Jalen is logical and probably the only reason you'd make that move. And I don't think there's one of those out there right now. I mean, would
Yeah,
you do if it came up and Houston were like, yo, we're gonna give you Sengun and some future picks for Jalen, would you do that?
yeah, if it's Sengun or Aman Thompson, those are the only two with picks that I would do. So you give me one of those two, we can have a conversation. There is one I wanted to throw to you if you were more interested in being kind of competitive this year. It seems like Cleveland is going to keep everybody but listen to offers for Allen and Garland. Would you do
Yeah.
Brown for Allen and Garland?
No. And okay, yes, maybe. I don't know. Right. Garland is, in my opinion, a very easy target in the postseason. Lacks strength, often gets targeted by opposing teams, struggles to fight through screens or navigate screens. Allen is Allen a bit of prize in that trade for me, and I think that the Celtics have missed having an explosive rim runner, and they haven't really had one since Rob. Like Nemi's probably as close as what you've got to that. I'm just not sure whether like could those two give you everything Brown gives you. May actually, yeah, I don't know. I'd need you through this. I'd need time to think. Like no was my initial answer, and now I'm kind of talking myself into the point where I'm on the fence, which means I'm pretty sure in about 10 minutes time I'm going to be all for it, and then I'm going to swing back and forth for about a week.
It's
That's a
spicy,
tough
right?
one.
Like, isn't that a kind of
Yeah.
like I was just kind of messing around with that in my head today when I saw like, oh, Garland and Allen
Does
could
the
be
money
available.
work?
I haven't done the cap stuff if we might have to add salary, whatever, but both of them
Should
are
I have a
highly paid.
look?
Yeah, let's take a little peek on the good old trade machine.
So I'm going over to Spot Track because that's the one where, you know. Now, the only thing with the Spot Track trade machine is it doesn't let you build a trade for the summer. It's all based on like right now. And that's a problem because obviously contracts, like everything's going to change. But we'll try it this way. And then if it's something that's like stopping us, we'll just head over to Fanspot. So it'll be Jalen Brown going to Cleveland, and then it'll be the Cavaliers, it'll be Darius Garland, and it'll be Jarrett Allen.
And what are they at about like 50 right now combined between the
So
two of them?
Okay, so Jarrett Allen and Darius Garland would bring in too much money. The Celtics would be taking on 7.5, and because you cannot aggregate salary,
Yep, exactly. Okay.
then there's a problem. Right now, Jalen this year is at 49 mil. That's going to go up to about 50 next season. But even then, you'd be taking on too much. You would need a third team. And even no, it wouldn't work like, because you cannot send a second guy out from Boston. So you'd have to make a deal. Now, this is where it can work, right? And this is where things get tricky. The Celtics would have to make a deal to get under the second apron, so then they could make this trade because then they can do that. Like they can take back more than they're sending out. And I'm not sure whether that means as long as you don't end up back in the second apron. That might be a restriction. I'm not sure on Billy. Are you sure on that one?
I am not sure on that one, but that sounds correct to me.
Yeah. So they'd have to get so far out of the second apron that they could absorb the 7.5 million additional money without being back in the second apron. So realistically,
Which
they'd
is
need
really
to shed.
like a Sam Hauser going into Atlanta's trade, exception.
Yeah.
There's
You'd
a
need to
ways to
shed a
get
lot.
yeah.
But it's okay, so it's a possibility, but there's a lot of steps that the Celtics would need to take to be in a position where that trade was even a viable option. And the one reason I do not expect this to happen, and probably the biggest reason why I would say no from a basketball standpoint, is you do not make a direct competitor better. You do not
Mm,
then turn around to Cleveland and be like, here's our second best guy, who's also an NBA Finals proven postseason performer. You can have him to pair with Donovan Mitchell. Like, no, I don't want that. That doesn't sound like it's a logical idea for me from that standpoint. From a talent standpoint, I like the idea of having Allen. I think I can be talked into a deal around these two, but making Cleveland better and better for long enough that there's still a problem when JT is back. Yeah, that would be where I kind of draw the line.
I mean, would it make him better though? Like on paper, yeah, but like, is Jalen gonna think he's the number one now next to Mitchell because he's accomplished a lot more than Mitchell, even though Mitchell is considered around the league a better player? Like, I mean, you might be destroying them from the inside with that trade.
Maybe, but then you're giving them two really fucking good
Good players.
like, and Brown's a two-way dude. When he like, if he finds that defense again that we saw last year, that on-ball defense, and then he finds that against the Celtics, like, and say Darius Garland goes missing in that series, and Brown's the reason Boston fall at a conference finals. People are going to view Brad very differently for a year or two after that, and I don't think I'd be willing to go through that. Now, I'd still probably be able to be talked into this for certain reasons, but Cleveland couldn't be a contending team for me to be okay with it, if that makes sense. I wouldn't sign off on it while Cleveland were good. They'd have to be ass. So I'm trading Brown into a position where, like, by the time they're good, our window's closing anyway.
That's interesting. I always think that's a fan reaction more than GMs. I don't think GMs care about trading with so-called rivals or competitors and making them better or not because like we saw it with we see it all the time where teams will trade within conference or within division.
Yeah, I mean, Luka to the Lakers, but I think it's how can I put this? I think that if you're very confident that the deal works for both sides and both sides are getting better, then you don't mind that because if
True.
you're like there's a lot of parity. But in this deal where I feel like Jalen Brown's the best player in the trade, and I'm not 100% sold on how Garland or Allen elevate the Celtics in any specific way, but I feel like they would, but I'm not sure how. Then I do have to kind of lean on like you're making Cleveland better here.
Yeah, I just love the idea of Garland and Allen next to Tatum. I think that
Yeah.
opens up just a different world that we haven't seen.
And I think Garland as well, we haven't seen the best of him recently because it's clear that the fit next to Donovan is super clunky.
Yeah, I
Like
don't like it.
they're not a great fit next to each other. Both of them are like defensive liabilities. You can't really hide one without the other one being exposed. And they're always gonna hide Mitchell more to save his motor for on offense. I think Allen came in for a bit of criticism this year. I know Channing Frye had some stuff to say about Jarrett Allen over not being physically enough, not being willing to embrace contact enough. I do think there's a world where the three of them, a JT, Jarrett Allen pick and roll with a lob threat would be wonderful. It'd be chef's kiss. Darius Garland being the guy to lead the half court offense with Derek White playing off him would be really fun to watch. maybe I don't know how much Garland's defensive limitations will cause pause in this, and we're spending far too long on this, so we can move on. But like, do you know what? Anyone watching it, if you've made it this far, let me know whether you do this trade. So anyone, this video is out for everyone on the paid tier of the Celtics Chronicle. If you're watching and you've got this far, would you do this deal? With that said, let's kind of wrap up here. So if I was in charge of the Celtics, or if we were in charge of the Celtics, I think we've agreed that we'd remain competitive, top five. We'd aim for the top five. We would prioritize young guys with upside and or draft picks, and we would look to trade two if two of Tatum, no, fucking not Tatum, two of Jrue, Kristaps, Porzingis, sorry, Kristaps, Jalen, and Sam. Right, so I think that's what we'd do there, and then I know we kind of glossed over this, but I think it's very apparent that both of us would be on board with re-signing Luke.
Yeah, I think that's actually gonna happen. We probably
Yeah,
have to make a couple moves first, but I do think that's in the cards. It's just we have his bird rights. It'd be stupid to let an asset like that go for
yeah.
nothing because even if you resign him, you could trade him later.
There we go. That's where I'm at. So everybody, I'll be back normal writing style tomorrow. I'm struggling to think of things to write about. So if you've got ideas, send them to me. I'll catch y'all soon. Billy, man, thanks for jumping in here, dude.